and welcome to today's vodcast episode of the 401k marketing vodcast video recording. And I'm super excited to share with you that our special guest speaker is none other than Spencer X. Smith of AmpliPhi Digital. He is the founder, and he's here today to talk about something that's on a lot of folks' minds, AI. So with that, Spencer, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So when Spencer and I were prepping for today's podcast, we talked about how AI went from being this very distant, kind of taboo, beginning phases. And last year at the FI 360 Broadridge conference, they did a poll of the audience. And they said, okay, everyone hop on your phones. If you use AI, click yes. And if not, then click no. And, somewhere in the middle, maybe thinking about it, part of a practice. And they put it all up on the big screen. And the majority of the advisors in the audience said, no, we are not using AI. We're not interested in it. It's not part of our business plan. Fast forward this October, I was at the Wealth at Work conference, and the same exact question showed up on the screen. Hey, everyone, grab your phones, click in anonymous poll. Are you using AI? And the results were night and day. Almost every advisor had clicked, yes, we are using AI in our offices. So now advisors are embracing AI. So let's talk about it, Spencer, and let's talk about how AI has adapted so quickly and how can advisors, wholesalers, record keepers, industry partners start to embrace some of those best practices in their business.
I think from an adoption standpoint, Rebecca, we had that big inflection point where ChatGPT became available to the public, and then the news sites all got on and they're like, hey, this is this wild thing that we wouldn't have expected, because a lot of us thought AI were going to replace manual labor, the driverless trucks, all this kind of stuff. And it ended up really getting into knowledge work, right? Those that rely on communication with clients, the written word, et cetera. Now we can expeditiously create really verbose statements on a whim. And I think at first it was the novelty, right? Like, write me a poem as a pirate about, happy holidays or whatever. And that was fine. And we could watch actually on Google Trends. If anyone's ever used that tool, you can ascertain how things go over time, like their popularity, right? And so things like AI tools, ChatGPT really hit, on a scale of 0 to 100, hit the 100, which is the relative popularity of this tool or that query specifically. And then it came down quite a bit. So we noticed that people tried it. They're like, this is cool. It's kind of a novelty, but it's not really for me. Yeah. And then you fast forward, and I think, our industry being so compliance laden, we didn't really know how to use it. So we could use it maybe personally, but we couldn't use it for work. And as firms started to figure this out, this is a really very important technology. Let's at least put some constraints on it, but not say, don't use this. Mm-hmm. So, hey, try this thing, adopt it through whatever tools that we give you. And I think people have realized that the time savings is really awesome, as well as having a thought partner upon whom we could rely that's infinitely knowledgeable, infinitely patient, and is super polite, because that's how it's programmed, right? So if you ask it a dumb question, it's not going to insult you. So that's where I think people have acclimated very quickly. And we have seen a bifurcation of those that use it in a very nascent sense, and then those that have really shifted a lot of their practice to doing more and more of it. So we can talk about, I think, both of those things if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd love to hear case studies on both of those, folks who have decided to embrace it and folks who are still a little bit more on the wait and see approach.
I think a lot of it has to do with the association with people have that with their organization, right? So if the organization said, let's say as an example, the largest one that we've seen from an adoption standpoint, from a work standpoint, would be Copilot from Microsoft, because a lot of companies are already Microsoft shops and they have all the security apparatus in place. Their E&O is covering Microsoft. So if they go, hey, if we use Copilot, which is through the Microsoft ecosystem, we can then knowingly adopt this and feel good about it, as opposed to maybe something like a ChatGPT, which would be OpenAI and these other tools that are out there where we don't have policies in place. And so if we say, all right, here's this thing available to you, use it, try it. Often people might say, well, let me use it to draft an email. And it's just typing in, help me draft an email about the Secure 2.0 repercussions for 2025. Okay, that's good, but it's not really your voice. And there's usually those giveaways, right? So something like an email that starts with "hope this finds you well," or some kind of other pleasantry, and just kind of goes into this weird sort of, and it doesn't really pass the uncanny valley test. Or like, I feel like this is not real. But then those that have used AI to expeditiously write in their voice, and we can get into more of this and how we customize this, that's where I think it's been really impactful. So it's married the ability to say, let me take in my brain and get into something on paper, or in print much more quickly versus having to think through something and type it.
Nice. I was, as you mentioned that, I thought of two instances recently where two different advisors have said, I started an email and I put it into, I guess there's we use G Suite at our firm. So I guess there's a Copilot integration with Outlook. So they typed it into Outlook and then they had Copilot kind of edit the email. And they said, and both of them said, the two advisors said the exact same thing. They said, it did a pretty good job. And then they said, I had to edit it. But they said it did a pretty good job. And that's like the soundbite. And that rings true to a couple edits, tweaks. So based on how you speak, what's your normal cadence? How do you email? What's your own professional spin on introductions? And then it sounds like you. So I think it's a great way to save time, be more efficient, professionalize what you're trying to say, and communicate it in a different manner than you might not traditionally have, but it creates really nice transparency throughout.
Yeah, so let's dig into that just for a second. Yeah. So I think you hit on 2 key points. And the first is that when you have an editor read your writing, so if you think about it, I have a thought, I write it, I read the way I thought I wrote it. But other people don't read it that same way because you use different language, you omit something, et cetera. So editors are great at doing that, like finding what you are trying to get to without you actually overtly stating it. But then maybe the big takeaway I'll give people is if we're using a tool like that to edit something, we can say something like nebulous, like improve this so it sounds better. I find that if we give it really specific instructions, like, did I write this in active voice? Or did I write it in passive voice? If I wrote it in passive voice, make sure it's an active voice. So it just sounds better. But then the other big thing that we found is that if you ask it to rate the prompt, so I'm going to give you what I want to send a client, rate this on a scale of 1 to 10. Here's my intent. So back to the Secure 2.0 example, right?
Sure.
I'd like to write my clients about what's happening new in 2025. So what's going to be enacted as of that date. Did I effectively say this? And what am I missing? And often it's going to read between the lines and go, hey, I know from this context, you are going this direction, but I found that you specifically didn't cite this thing. So why don't we add that? And so if we go into the prompt and say something like a scale of 1 to 10, rate this prompt, it's going to come back and say it's a 6 or an 8 or whatever. And then you can ask it, well, make it a 10. And that's going to be that much more effective as far as getting your writing up to the par that you perhaps want to operate it. And that's just a really cool way to hack it, if you will, and get it to do what you want.
I love it. Cool. Also, during our prep session, we started talking about some other cool AI products that are out there. And you mentioned one. And can you talk about it a little bit?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of flown under the radar a little bit because I think ChatGPT has a lot of the mind share from a branding standpoint. And then certainly people know Microsoft Copilot. Notebook is from Google, and Google has their own chat feature, which would be called Gemini, used to be called Bard, and it works well. But with Notebook LM, we can take a bunch of files, whether it's PDFs, Word docs, text files, audio files, video files, and use that as a corpus of data from which we can start to draw out what we want from the document. So maybe a really good example of this is, let's say we have a plan document, SPD, any kind of documents that would be associated with a 401k plan specifically. We can upload all those documents to a Notebook LM project. So it just lives in this one project. It's siloed. And then ask the tool, hey, based on what you know about the plan, what are the provisions when it comes to participant loans? And it'll, based on that data, give you the results. So what's kind of cool about that is we know that the results that we're getting back are probably right because it doesn't need to deviate from what we gave it. And so that can apply to either it's a self-service kind of plan document repository for participants, or as an advisor or maybe an advisor team, when they're getting asked questions, they just can have a project for each respective plan that they service and ask that project for those plan provisions, whatever the question is, and know that that is the right answer. And then going a step further, if I could, the notebook functions have all of these things built in. So you can say, I'm going to give it all these documents. Give me a table of contents, a study guide, an FAQ. And so it pre-populates a lot of these interactivities between the people that might be using it and those documents. So it's just a really cool way to again, get stuff out the door much more quickly and not have to worry about typing things in or creating some kind of front end that maybe would be a little bit more arduous to create without that.
Yeah, I love that. There's just all these new tools keep coming out that are creating faster, better, smarter workflows that before would take hours to find, create it, look through it, any modifications, any like meeting minute notices that you have to comb through or remember, think about, and you can just push all of it, upload anything into one system, start asking some questions like what was the thought process behind why we stuck with this investment strategy, and it can share with you what the committee had said from minutes going back to as far as you uploaded them. I just think that's such a great way of showing documentation and process and in an organized manner. It's like, oh my goodness, it's like the new fiduciary vault 2.0.
Yeah. Well said. And from a best practice standpoint, so let's say we're using something like Notebook, which would make a lot of sense in this case. So we're going to have an investment committee meeting. We're going to revisit the funds or, whatever the policies are. So if I have an audio recording of that, I could just in the raw format, upload that to Google's, Notebook LM in this case, but I have to kind of trust that it's going to be able to ascertain what the deal was between these different people that were talking. And it's not really good at that. So if we marry that with somebody taking notes on headlines, if you will. So, okay, investment review. So fund review. Mm-hmm. So in this part, we're going to talk about fund review. So we state that overtly and we actually type that out. It's going to take those headlines, if you will, or each respective section and marry that up with the audio and go, okay, here's what you told me we're going to concentrate on when it comes to this part of the audio, and then take the audio transcription and put that as far as the more, robust version of the documentation. So those that are taking notes can be really engaged with the committee, but say, let me just be sure to give this tool instructions so it knows what we're talking about in each respective case. And so same thing can be with any people that are attending speeches or classes or whatever. It's just a really cool way to make sure that you have the most demonstrable knowledge as a takeaway.
Cool. All right. So new tool alert, Notebook LM. Still working in terms of figuring out like exactly how retirement plan related, but definitely something that could be used in the 401k space. That's so. Let's talk about workflow. Workflow is always something that gets bottlenecked, here and there. There's only so many people, processes you can stack, and then all of a sudden it's like, oops, I'll get back to you in a couple days on that one. It's in queue or it's in process. Walk us through how something like a ChatGPT could support with the workflow processes so that way they are more efficient.
Yeah, this has been the biggest breakthrough and the biggest time saver for any professionals that I found. So we go back, let's just call it 20 years. There's a tool that now was purchased by Microsoft recently. It was called Nuance by Dragon Software. Okay. And you'd put on a headset and you train it based on your voice. So it could write for you using your voice as opposed to you typing. Okay. And that was cool at the time. Now it's just, we all know that. We just turn on the mic on our phone or whatever and it'll write for you, right? Yeah. But the caveat there is that often we don't speak exactly the way we want something written, because I think we've all received texts where it's like, wait, sure, what was she saying there? Like, I need to clarify this. And that's okay. And so something like a ChatGPT or any other tool, if you just turn on your microphone on your computer or your phone, can do this stuff for you. But what I found is really effective is back in the wholesaling days, I had this thing called Copy Talk.
I remember that.
Okay, so wholesalers, you're doing, like 4 to 6 meetings a day, right? Making phone calls between meetings, but you get out of the first meeting and you call Copy Talk and you say, well, I met with Rebecca, her kids' names are this, her pets, her interests, like all that stuff that you want to make sure that you circle back to. You heard the opportunities we have, et cetera. And a human being back in the day with Copy Talk would actually write back what you said. Right. And then you put that in whatever CRM you were using at the time. And I know we didn't really have CRMs back then, but whatever repository we had. So something like ChatGPT, as opposed to just having it write for you, you can turn on the microphone function that's native within the software and talk through what it is that you want to say. So got out of this meeting with Rebecca, talked about this. You have all your ums and ahs and, oh, wait, I forgot about this. And you can just say basically whatever you want. Yeah. And it's going to take a concise version of what you said and make that a prompt. And then from that prompt, when you enter the prompt, it's going to say, well, here are your notes based on your instructions of all the salient stuff that you need to cover. Here's all of her personal information, background information that you want to know. Here are the opportunities we discussed. Here's the proposals that I owe them. So it's just a wonderful way to use this technology tool to help get things into your CRM much more quickly. That would just be really, really tough otherwise.
Oh, that's such a great example of, it's the modern version of copy talk, essentially, as you're writing it out. Then ChatGPT would, or Copilot would then take that, summarize it in a more digestible manner. And then you could even have bullet points out with what your follow-ups are, what their follow-ups are. And you could even give the prompt, convert this into an email. And then you could have a draft email that you could easily share, great meeting with you. Here's a summary of our conversation, and listed below are the items that we need in order to move forward with the proposal, and attached are the items that we discussed. I think that's such a clean way of following up and demonstrating active listening.
I love what you said about taking what it gives you and then say, turn this into something. So email, bulleted list, agenda items. And I found that on the front end too, it helps a lot to say, hey, I got out of an opportunity or a meeting with a new advisor. She and I haven't worked together before. So what I'd like you to do is take notes in a way that I would have done had I been in the meeting by hand, and make sure that you give me the most important information. So personal information, opportunities, and then my follow-up items. And it'll go through and do that on the front end, so you don't have to do it on the back end.
Yeah, and that saves so much time and memory space, and trying to remember, like, what was their dog's name? I remember we talked a little while about, they had this great dog. Like, what was the name of it? You could just, you have that all fresh in your mind as you're driving, in your car again. And copy talk, well, it was great, and you kind of just left like this really long-winded voicemail. Now, when you're doing the voice to text, it's very accurate based on people's voices, and it'll pick up all those details that are still kind of tinkling in your mind. It's an easy win as a follow-up, as you've left a great meeting and opportunity. Awesome. We talked also about the concept of making stuff invisible. And I really liked our conversation around this. So as retirement plan practitioners start to think about bringing AI into their business and trying to figure out how to make some stuff, and I just thought the word invisible was really spot on. Can you expand on that and what your thoughts are around it?
So when we think about a lot of the technologies that we use, we don't need to wonder how they work. They just work. Like, how does my phone connect to the internet? Like, I don't know. Like, it just does. And right now we have to make a choice to use AI. It's kind of like back in the day, like, I'm going to go online now, right? I'm going to use America Online or whatever and dial into the internet, and then use the internet, and then get off the internet, right? But now it's just ubiquitous, right? It's just expected. So with AI tools, and I think probably the big inflection point for many people will be the Apple Intelligence tool, where it's just going to be part of, if you take Siri and make Siri really, really smart and personalized, that's going to be that much better.
Siri's
so if we say,
dumb today.
It is. I mean, all of the tools like Google Home, Alexa, like, can you tell me the score of the Chargers games? Like, no, the Chargers didn't. It's like, what? Come on, just tell me the score, right?
I need the history of the Chargers, Siri. I just want the score today.
Yes. Yeah, not last week's either, like today's. So if we think about something like Apple Intelligence, where they have all of your personal information, all of your health data, all contact information, who you most are likely to contact, et cetera. The way that if I could think about something that would be a really easy way that I could see Apple Intelligence ingratiating itself into what we do work-wise, because I was talking to a venture capitalist the other day, and they have these ebbs and flows in their business, right? Like, things go crazy and they get all these messages and then it falls off. And he said, Spence, I feel bad because I have 17 text messages that I read, but I never answered. And I'm like, well, how do I go back and reconcile all of this stuff? So maybe an example would be, we set up Apple Intelligence or some other tool and say, hey, anytime I have a half hour in the car, start to prompt me and go, you didn't respond to Rebecca on this text from 4 days ago. Do you want to write something back? Yes, I do. Okay, what do you want to say back? Okay, cool. And it's done. So think about like all of those times where it's like, well, what do I do with these 4 minutes I have or this half-hour drive that I have or whatever? That's where these tools, again, are just going to become a part of what we expect, because it's going to do a lot of thinking on your behalf. So here's what I want you to do. Help me optimize for time. Help me make sure that during the workday, I'm getting as many messages as possible to the right people as possible. And then that'll be where we don't really think about, is this AI or not? It just becomes part of what we do.
So that 4-minute break that I used to have where I could walk in peace to go get something in my life is now going to prompt me to say, hey, you forgot to respond to these 18 people. And I'm going to go,
right,
oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you just got to tell it. Be like, look, don't bother me for 4 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever. Right?
I just need 20 minutes. It's just 20 minutes. We just started watching Bluey in our house. My daughter's 3. There's an episode that's called Mom Just Needs 20 Minutes. And there's many times in my life where I'm like, Mom just needs 20 minutes. So Spencer, if I start getting those notifications on my, like, you have 20 minutes, I'm decline. But that's cool that it'll come to that. And then we'll be able to have something in that gap time if you so choose to work at that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing about being retirement plan advisors and AI, profitability. Such an important thing. So we're talking about being more efficient, enhancing workflow and functionality, speed, process. How does this drive bottom line results in increasing profitability?
I think it's going to be headcount related, unfortunately. So where I can back this up. So there's a company here where I live in Madison, Wisconsin. They have 50 offices throughout the country. A lot of people have been around a long time. And I was talking to the CIO, and they have a help desk. And then they have those that are just above the help desk in their IT department.
Sure.
And he was meeting with his IT director, and he was telling me, look, these help desk people, where we used to have 5, now we need 2. So these 3 people need to either upskill,
yep,
or they need to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And the IT director is like, well, we can't just get rid of people. It's like, we need to get rid of people. It's our obligation. So I think profitability wise, if we were to think about the highest, most value add activities, this is where it's a double-edged sword, right? So we could easily dismiss those that could be automated or replaced by AI, but also at the same time, and maybe it's not a double-edged sword, maybe it's actually a dual benefit, is that there's now opportunities for anybody to learn anything in a way that they want. So I could be a complete neophyte when it comes to any topic.
Sure. And
go to one of these infinitely patient, knowledgeable tutors and say, and the shorthand that we often use is ELI 5. Okay, so explain like I'm 5, quantum physics or whatever, sure, like something super complicated, right? So ELI 5, this topic. Okay, now I get this. Okay, so now graduate me to high school level. Okay, cool. Now graduate level. Well, okay, now stop. I didn't quite understand that. Can you tell me that in another way?
Right.
So I really believe that if people want to get better at things, now is the best time in history by far, because there's information is not relegated to any specific individual or any specific resource, nor is it only said one way where you go, I didn't get that. I heard that speaker and I didn't get what he had to say. Well, explain this to me in another way, or use analogies to help me tie back to it. So I think it's really a function of those two things, is how do we get people to do the most profitable activities and then have them graduate from the places that they were, or maybe it was just more of the rudimentary work.
Explain it to me like I'm 5 is how you begin it. And then high school, and then college, and then possibly some other use cases, case studies, examples to help saturate it. I love that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So many years ago, I remember when Facebook came out. And at the time, everyone was like, social media is weird. And now, 20 years later, like if you're not on social media, people think that you're a little interesting. LinkedIn came out and it was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to catch on. 20 years later, now LinkedIn has obviously caught on. Twitter, now X, same thing. And now everyone is kind of caught on. TikTok, politics aside, people love TikTok. And I think this is the next one. And a lot of times when it's new, the merry-go-round is slow. You know, people get on, like squirrely, like, oh, it's okay. And then it starts to go a little fast. The merry-go-round starts to go a little faster and a little faster and a little, and then all of a sudden it's at like warp speed. So if you're now entering the workforce, you're like, I think I'm going to start LinkedIn. It's a very different lift than it was 20 years ago when all of us started LinkedIn and we were like, I don't know, click this button, connect. Like, this is kind of fun. That's what AI is right now. Like right now, it's like merry-go-round is just going to like 5 miles an hour. And you can get on, you can get off, like no big deal. You don't know all the little programs yet. What does 3 years from now look like, Spencer?
It's really tough to estimate as far as what's possible, but I can tell you at least a couple trends that I see. Coincidentally, as we record this right now, Sam Altman from OpenAI just made public their latest release of Sora, which SORA, which is their video tool. So text to video, right? And I think that's going to blow a lot of people's minds as to what's possible with video. But then what's more likely as far as a work standpoint is we're going to have these things called agents. So right now what we're doing a lot of is manual. So I'm going to go use ChatGPT, type something in. It's going to give me something back. I'm going to converse with it back and forth. So the agent would be acting on your behalf when it comes to a task or a project. And it's going to coordinate all of the things that need to be done.
I love this.
Okay, so as an example, let's say we need to onboard a new plan client. Okay, so there's stuff like, well, we gotta figure out how to send all these notices. We have to figure out participant education meetings. We have to figure out the lineups of funds and the applicability and the target dates and all that kind of stuff. If I give an agent a role to say, you are responsible for onboarding a new 401k client for our organization, go find me all of the resources necessary to make this happen. And it's going to be able to implement both AI agents as well as human agents. So we don't have AI enrollers yet. Okay, so it's going to say, well, okay, as your onboarding agent, I'm going to find these things that I can automate, but then I need to implement this enrollment person as well. So make sure that she shows up at this day, at this time. And so it's going to be more of a coordinator that's project-based or task-based. So that's going to be really exciting. That's probably going to come out January 2025 in mass. And it'll be really exciting to see what happens then. Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool. So agents, that's the next iteration.
Yeah, that's the next thing.
So,
yeah.
Okay, one less thing that humans will have to do and to coordinate. I remember years ago when I used to work on the record keeping side, I came up with an Excel spreadsheet and we would have like conversion date, paperwork, like in good order, like blackout dates, enrollment dates, and there was a very, very, very small math equation behind the scenes, like plus 2 weeks, plus 7 days, plus 5 days. So then it would all schedule it out. And then we'd, when people, education and specialists, enrollers were going to go out to said company and, payroll goes live. Yeah. If there's an agent that does all that, now that could be. And that was always a huge project. You always had to coordinate with multiple different people and different teams and different departments and the company. And then, the company I was at for record keeping, all that's could be gone January 1st.
Give or take. Yeah.
Give or take. Yeah.
Which coincides perfectly with the end of selling season. So we can at least acclimate ourselves a little bit, right?
This is going to be wild. So as that merry-go-round, which is just going right now, a little 5 miles an hour, hop on. Because that thing, just like the rest of the programs, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, once it starts picking up speed, it goes fast. And then it's really hard to learn some of those basics. Explain it to me like I'm 5, so that way you can adapt it into your business for workflow, for profitability, for ease of business, to make you faster, better, and smarter. Well, Spencer, thank you. Any last words, words of wisdom, ideas, best practices that you want to share with folks listening today?
I think one thing we wanted to cover is if we're prospecting new plan business, how do I speak the language of those that maybe I haven't worked with before? So maybe you specialize in professional services businesses and a friend says, hey, I have this HVAC company and they want you to pitch their plan. How do I use language that will correspond with what they understand? With a tool like ChatGPT or whatever you might want to use, you can say, this is the business that I'm in. right? I'm in the 401k business, and you know the language that we use, and it's very specific, and BIPs and all this kind of stuff that's just natural to us, but not to other people. Say, well, I'm going to pitch an HVAC company. Help me understand the nuances of their language that they use specifically, and how do I tie that in? So to make analogies. So when you're choosing funds from a fund menu, this is a lot like when you go through and you choose your cooling system or whatever, and make it sound like you know what they're doing. And at least it's from a genuine standpoint, right? I really want to understand your business and how your business operates, but it just gets you there that much more quickly because there's no resource on the internet right now. That's how to speak 401k to a plumbing company or an HVAC company, but you could create one. So it's just a matter of, figuring out how best to know what it is that you should to make yourself at least be a little bit better at building that rapport that you couldn't do before.
That's such great advice. Beautiful. All right. Well, if folks want to contact you to help with consulting work, strategy, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. Best resource is spencerxsmith.com. That's my website. Or as you said, LinkedIn. I'm still on the LinkedIn merry-go-round, so we can hook up there.
Well, thanks again so much for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for listening to today's vodcast. Please like, subscribe. And if you have a guest or if you'd like to be a guest, please reach out. We'd love to welcome you on to the episodes. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great year.
Thank you so much for listening to today's 401k Marketing Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of our guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of 401k Marketing. The content has been available for informational and educational purposes only. We hope you enjoyed.